Hello, this is Dr. Rob Thompson, and this will be our second video of a 3-video series, and this one is on gender and gender identity. Definitions of gender vary slightly, but the general concept is that gender is the characteristic of females and males within a society. In short, the range of characteristics pertaining to femininity and masculinity and the differentiation between them. Mark Yarhouse defines gender as the psychological, social, and cultural aspects of being male or female. Gender role is how people are expected to act, speak, dress, groom, and behave based on biological sex, or the outward manifestation of personality reflecting gender identity. Gender roles are defined by society and culture. This was referred to as sex roles in the past and is known as sex roles in biology when not referencing humans. Gender roles differ between societies and change over time. They're not stable. Gender roles, while tightly connected to gender stereotyping, also have some flexibility within societies. No individual embodies all traditionally feminine or masculine characteristics. There is room within gender role for variance. Gender identity, basically defined as a personal conception of oneself as male or female, or both, or neither. Gender identity is closely related to gender role. Gender identity now reflects the internal sense of masculinity and femininity and the social roles associated with each. In the past, gender was viewed the same as sex. If someone did not present their gender or sex in a socially acceptable way, the individual was subject to legal action. This shifted towards a psychiatric or medical paradigm by the 1950s, whereas people who did not follow traditionally accepted gender or sex presentation were seen to be experiencing a medical or emotional issue which required treatment. This can be demonstrated by surgeries on infants born with indeterminate genitalia, as well as what is now referred to as reparative therapy. During this paradigm shift, Dr. John Money was very influential. Dr. Money, who is widely recognized as the foremost expert on transsexualism, has been credited as the first to use the term gender as a separate concept from biological sex. Dr. Money believed gender was a social construct rising from the socialization of children to appropriate feminine and masculine behavior. He firmly believed nurture overrides nature. And the debate rages. Is it socialization, sex-linked genes, prenatal sex hormones, or specific sites of the brain, or maybe a combination of all of them that determines the behaviors associated with femininity and masculinity? Much of this is unknown, in part because studies give conflicting results and often have serious methodological flaws. What we do know, much of what we reference as gender or gender roles, is established and reinforced via socialization. Initially, parents and families are the primary socializers, and school later becomes more significant. And after that, peers, including social media, are more significant. Gender socialization even starts before birth in families, with actions such as gender or sex reveal parties and the painting of the nursery. Is gender identity innate or malleable? Does gender identity change? Or can it change? From what we seem to know, it appears gender identity, or one's internal sense of self, can change for some, but not for others. Is gender innate or socialized? Gender is probably not an either-or, but most likely a combination of complex interacting processes. Researchers have found it hard to identify and isolate innate non-physical differences between males and females, masculinity and femininity, because of the wide variance within each group when looking at personality characteristics. Of those they find, is it due to their biological sex or socialization? With that said, there are certainly statistical relevant differences between males and females. However, there remains a very high correlation between biological sex and gender identity, with over 99% of people's gender identity lining up with their biological sex. While correlation does not prove causation, the strength of the correlation certainly suggests there is a link. Now let's discuss some possible or even probable innate characteristic differences between males and females, masculinity and femininity. Now remember, all differences between the genders or sexes are viewed on average. There's a distribution of characteristics across both males and females. And so we look at the mean scores, there are differences, and just know there's significant overlap between these characteristics. As you review the possibilities of what we look at, note that some of them may uh, be the result of socialization. It's really hard to know. So for females, they tend to be better at verbal and communication skills, better at decoding nonverbal skills, tend to smile and cry more frequently, more interested in people versus things, and that starts very early within weeks or days of birth. More sociable and sensitive, warm and anxious, less capable in spatial abilities. Let's move to more personality related tasks. They're less aggressive, less risk taking than males, more extreme agreeableness, like in the Big Five, and more emotional connectedness in relationships. Whereas males are more interested in things than faces or people. And again, that starts very early in infancy. Better at spatial tasks, less expressive in body language, and less able to read body language. Personality related, they're more disagreeable, assertive, and dominant, more prone to interrupt and be confrontational, more prone to risk taking and thrill seeking, and more stable emotionally. And they tend to be more conservative. Again, discussion surrounding gender identity, biological sex, and those whose sense of their own femininity or masculinity is still not settled. When someone says their gender is different than their biological sex, they mean they don't resonate with feminine or masculine generalities as defined by society. Is gender or gender role hardwired, nature or innate, or social culture? Like many tough questions, the answer is complex and could be probably not, or either or more likely an interaction of both nature and nurture. All should agree that masculinity and femininity are based on generalizations. So, if we note that men are on average taller than women, the fact you know a woman who's 6'6" does not change this generalization. There is a significant difference between the mean heights of females, a little less than 5'4", and males a little over 5'9", but there's plenty of overlap. Since gender identity is seen as one's internal sense of self as female, male, or both, or neither, we still don't know exactly what this internal sense is or where the sense originates. What we do know is that people whose internal sense of self does not align with their biological sex, they experience great personal distress, which is diagnosed as gender dysphoria. Gender dysphoria is a diagnosis, not a disorder. At the current time, the conversation surrounding gender is highly political and volatile, and it reaches into all venues of discussion. It is important to remember people who have gender dysphoria often have great distress and can suffer at the hand of society, politically, and the church. Pictured is a genderbread person, a teaching tool created by Sam Kellerman. The genderbread person is a diagram demonstrating the current gender science understanding of biological sex, the physical sex characteristics you are born with, gender identity, how you define gender based on how much you align or don't align with societal expectation for gender norms, gender expression, the ways you present gender through actions, dress, and demeanor, and how those presentations are interpreted based on gender norms, and sexual attraction. Who are you sexually or romantically attracted to? And yes, it can be different. Gender as a spectrum. You'll note the genderbread person diagram also places each of the four categories on continuums. This represents the wide variety of how individual people may feel about their internal sense of self. Remember, people who may feel more feminine, masculine, a combination, or neither, or both. The flexibility within the spectrum allows for a wide range of identity. Where do we go from here? Gender roles, gender expression, and gender identity are all sociocultural, political, and theological hot buttons. It is also easy to lose track of the humanity of the people involved. Remember, the people who have gender dysphoria are often under a great amount of emotional stress and turmoil. They are hurting and their experiences are real to them. So, be informed. Keep abreast of discussions and don't focus on one side or the other. Try to learn as much as you can. Be compassionate, remembering people that are gender non-conforming are human beings, and do common courtesy, human dignity, and compassion. The process of sorting through gender-related issues is difficult, confusing, and complex. Be a learner. If you interact with someone who is gender nonconforming, don't assume you know what's going on. Let the individual share their personal experience with you.